ELT webinar. My name is Charlotte Christopherson, and I'll be moderating today's session in place of our usual host, Alistair Horn. My colleagues, Jane and Eleanor, are also here to help with any queries that you might have. During the webinar, you'll be able to hear our speaker, Kerry Jones, and to see her slides, but you won't be able to see Kerry herself, and you won't need a microphone. If you'd want to ask a question, please use the chat box, and I'll make sure to ask Kerry at the end of her presentation during the scheduled question and answer session. The recording of today's webinar will be on our blog and on YouTube next week, and you should all receive an email certificate for attending today's webinar within the next week or so. I'm very pleased to welcome Kerry Jones as this afternoon's presenter. Kerry is a freelance teacher, trainer, and materials writer. She's been working in ELT since 1986 and in Spain since 1998. She has written for a number of coursebook series for both adults and secondary, and is particularly interested in student-centered materials and activities. She writes about her experiences and her experiments on her blog, Close Up, and we'll be sharing a link to that towards the end of the webinar. And Kerry has recently been working on Eyes Open and Uncover, new secondary courses for Cambridge University Press. So, over to you, Kerry. Sorry, we seem to be having a bit of a problem with Kerry's audio. Just checking that just now. Sorry about this, Kerry. I'll just try and figure out what's gone on.
Is that working now? Is that any better?
We're getting a bit of a buzzing sound in the background. I can hear you.
You're getting a buzzing sound. Hold on a second.
Yes.
I think I can sort that out. Yeah?
Yes, that's much better now.
Is that any better? Hold on a second. I'm going to do one more little hack here to see if that helps. Is that any better?
Yes, that's fine now.
Okay. Lovely. Sorry about that. So I was talking away to myself earlier. So this question seems to be a pretty... Okay, is everyone okay now? Yeah? Okay. So I'll let you know my hack. I just unplugged the power on the laptop, and that's what usually causes the buzz. No idea why the sound went, though. Okay, so life with tech, eh? Don't you love it? Anyway, getting back to the slide and the question. It seems like a pretty basic question, but just very quickly in the chat box, what are your very short answers to that? Why might we want to use video with students in the classroom, and not video produced by other people, but actually video that students are producing themselves? I don't know if any of you have experimented with this at all, but what would you say in maybe 4 or 5 words might be good reasons for using student-generated video in the classroom? Motivation, more engaging, more personal and relevant. Okay, so it's coming up, the same words are coming up again and again. Engagement, motivation, relevance. So just take a look a moment at that smartphone in the middle of the slide. When was the last time you took a photo with your smartphone? Can you just quickly type in the chat box? When was the last time you took a photo on your phone? 1 minute ago? I'm getting there. 2 minutes ago? 2 days ago? 10 seconds ago? Okay, what about a video? When was the last time you shot a short video? We're talking short here, seconds, or probably under 2 minutes. Okay, so we're getting more of a gap there with the video. Now, some people are saying 15 minutes this morning. A long time ago, I'm getting as well. Okay. If we go into the minds of our teenage students, when would be the last time that they would have shot a video on their phone? Do you think it's any different? I'm getting today, like yesterday, constantly in each lesson, okay? Yeah, so this is a little bit of one of the many answers to the question why, is that this is just something that the teens are doing anyway. You know, it's very much part of their language and their communication between each other. They share short video clips with each other, and they watch and they consume short video clips practically all the time. So just another last quick question for you in the chat box. First of all, do you watch short video clips on your smartphone? I'm guessing I'm going to get a lot of yeses. Oh, there's a couple of no's in there. And a rarely. Okay, I'm getting a more iPad there, I think, from Paul. Yeah? If you have watched a short video on your phone recently, can you remember what the last one was that you watched? TED, Zootopia, another TED talk about politics, a viral one, recipes, again, politics, pranks, animals on Facebook. That is my weakness as well in the morning. For some reason, it can't really wake up until I've seen some cute puppies or kittens or something on Facebook. Okay, so basically we're all there. We're all kind of at the same point of this idea that video clips are just very much part of the day-to-day landscape of our lives. More so, less so, depending on the context where you are, your connectivity. Maybe there are ways that you prefer to access the internet, but for a lot of people, certainly in my context, smartphones are very much where the kids, the teenagers, are watching a lot of YouTube clips, Snapchat videos, sharing videos. So they are incredibly familiar with making videos, watching videos. It's a language, it's a medium that they really understand. Okay, so moving on to how this works in the classroom. Oh, sorry. First of all, a couple of statistics. Have a look at this one. Notice in brackets what it says. It's quite a wow statistic, isn't it? Okay, watch the next one. Now that's over in fact, it's not over the last 12 months. This is a statistic from the end of last year. So it was over the whole of 2015. Video has suddenly boomed on social media. People are sharing and uploading videos so much more, and this is just something that's increasing exponentially. It's kind of video is just there at the moment, is very much the medium for everything. And business in particular is really worried about, oh my God, how can we have a presence through video? And so this is something, again, which is just completely surrounding us. So I'm going to look specifically at what I call micro tasks in the classroom. And these micro tasks are short tasks which take place within the lesson with videos which are no longer than 1 minute long. And we'll go into the how and the why in a minute. So a micro task, in my definition, is a task which can take place in class. It's only one take. There may be a little bit of preparation or rehearsal beforehand, but it's one take, and then we use it immediately for some follow-on tasks. So the video isn't an end, as it were, it's a means. It's a means to then go on and do something else. We're going to have a look at some examples now. So the first example is a silent movie. And in this case, we're just using the visual side of video. So the first thing that I ask my students to do, this is the context of this here is that I'm teaching a secondary class at the moment. It's actually a strange class because it's a mixed class of teens and adults. It's an after-school class. It's the older teens, 16, 17 years old, and adults who are actually the age of their parents. So it's quite an interesting little mix there. And this was an exercise we did recently because we'd been working on phrasal verbs and we were reviewing phrasal verbs. So could you just quickly in the chat box write phrasal verbs with up? Close up. Close up as a verb. Okay, loads of them. Excellent. So the students have absolutely had no problem at all with thinking of 10. Then they had to choose one of the verbs. And in their group, they were then told the task. So they were going to make a short silent video to illustrate the phrasal verb. And then sometimes they changed their choice of phrasal verb because they realized that they'd chosen a phrasal verb which wasn't going to be that easy to illustrate. So then in both of those steps, there's a little bit of processing of the list going on because they're having to go through the list to make a choice. They're having to think of a definition of the verb. They're having to already place that verb in a context in their minds in order to be able to think of a video to illustrate the verb. I didn't mention to them at all that this needed to then extend into a story, which is something that it does do, but that I didn't share with them. But they're already having to process the phrasal verbs to give it a context, to be able to visualize an example of the phrasal verb in use. So anyway, whether they stuck with their original or they changed their phrasal verb, they made a video and they had a limit of 10 seconds. They had to be able to illustrate the phrasal verb within 10 seconds, and they could work in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. More than 4 gets tricky, I think, with the sharing of a small device, also the sharing of the roles or whatever. And then they had to actually do the video, it's taking, as it were, the actual recording. And then they swapped phones. They actually physically swapped devices with each other, looked at each other's clips, and then there was a general round of seeing whether or not people had understood the correct phrasal verb. So I'm going to just show you now one of those videos from this is actually from a younger class, because the older teens were really shy with this one and didn't want to share. So this is one from a younger class. We'll watch the video and see if you can guess the phrasal verb and type it into the chat box. I'm gonna keep quiet for 10 or 15 seconds after the video has played in case you've got a little bit of lag, and so that I don't talk across the video for you. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody's got that one. Okay, so pick up, and Tatiana, you're saying stole. Well, yes, obviously that's kind of the little story. Sneak up is a nice one. Okay, get away with. Okay, that's another nice phrasal verb, even if it isn't with up. So there's this whole possibility of other phrasal verbs, of course, that are going through the students' heads as they're selecting which is the correct phrasal verb for each video. And then what they have to do is that they write the phrasal verb down in a sentence, okay? So in this case, we've got the student, and we'll give him a name, Carlos. And so they say they have to write the sentence in, it could be Carlos picked up the wallet, or Carlos is picking up the wallet, or Carlos picks up the wallet, whatever, however they want to phrase it. And so what they're doing is on a sheet of paper they have to write just one sentence for each one of the videos that they've seen in the classroom. So it could be 3 or 4 different videos there, or it might be more depending on the size of your classroom. In my case, I had 4 videos there. So just to, as a kind of a recall, they regroup, they remember all of the videos, and they write one sentence for each video. Then the group with their own video, they have to think about that sentence and what happened exactly before, what happened exactly afterwards. So what was Carlos doing before? What did Carlos do afterwards? And they have to write the sentence for before, and they write the sentence for afterwards. If you want, you can ask them to do it only for their own group, or they can do it for all of the groups. If there are a few groups, then that's quite practicable. And then they can just share their ideas as to what happened before, what happened afterwards, or if you prefer, you can get them to work in groups and work their phrasal verb within this sentence into a richer context of a short story of what happened with the wallet, for example. So even though we're starting off with just one isolated vocabulary item, as it were, we're working with putting it into a context, and the students visualize the context, and then they take the visual and they put it into language. So we're building on the video that the students made to then play with the language, review the language, put it back into a context. So it's not something which is just isolated, but something that's built into the activity. So that's the first activity. I have to give credit here to a trainer called Sean Wilden, who I saw doing a very similar activity but with still photos, so that the students would have a kind of a freeze frame to illustrate. I think he was working with phrasal verbs as well. But of course, the thing with a verb is that usually a verb shows action. And so if you want to illustrate a verb, it's much better if you can include movement. So a still is much more difficult to illustrate the meaning of a verb than if you have movement as well. And the students much prefer taking a short video than they do taking a photo, or at least that was what I found with my students. So, Inessa, you're saying that Carlos got away with it. We don't know if Carlos got away with it or not. That's up to you to decide. Okay, any questions or comments on this first example? And then we'll move on to the next one. It's practical. I'm glad you think it's practical, and I think that there are lots of different contexts where you can use it as well. Illustration of various different kinds of vocabulary items, whatever vocabulary set you're working with, I think. Leonardo, you're saying, do the students film the video in class or beforehand? The whole idea with these tasks is that the filming happens in class. And with the silent movies, where there's no language involved, it's just the visual that's important, then that's very easy. When it comes to actually recording speech as well, then we have to be a bit more careful, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute with the next example that we're going to look at. But yes, the idea with these tasks is that the students have their smartphones in their pockets and they can use them. Now, I don't know if this is something that's possible in your context. In my context, we don't have superb connectivity in class with the computer. We don't have a smartboard. We don't have a whiteboard even. We have a chalkboard and a screen for projecting. So we're kind of hampered technologically with sharing things on a big screen. So we do a lot of sharing on small screens. But also sometimes there's this problem with data packages. In Spain, they're expensive. and the kids have got limited data package. So if we're working on their smartphones and they're using their video recorder, then they're not using up their data package. Later, I ask them to share that with me, but once they're at home and they can use their Wi-Fi, and they will send me their videos, we share them on a WhatsApp group, usually with the classes that I'm working with at the moment, but it doesn't have to be WhatsApp. It can also be any kind of place where you can share those online. If you're working in a class classroom which has got good connectivity, or with students who don't mind using their data, then they can share those immediately in some kind of an online space, and that's really nice when you can have all of the videos on one large screen and to share them. That would definitely be the way I'd like to do it if I could, but my classroom doesn't allow for that. Sonny, you're saying that not all children have smartphones and they're not allowed to use them in class. So that's a very good point, and what I've done with this is when there are classes where the students, for example, in my case, it's not that they don't have phones, but they've used up all their memory, or they've forgotten to charge their phone. So there's not enough battery to power the video camera. Then I will stagger the filming and they do it on my phone. Whether they drop it or not, I've never had a student actually drop my phone. They're very respectful of devices on the whole. I have also worked in a school where there was, on the whole, kind of a blanket no use of phones. So I asked for permission to use the phone as a camera, and I was allowed to do that. That was within a state school. So I think, yes, there can be limitations depending on your context. If you have limitations on your context that you really can't use them in the class, then you can set this kind of work for homework. And then you can share the videos in class if they share them with you outside the classroom. Okay, so should we move on to another example then? Oh, sorry. Right, example 2. I'm going to share a hashtag with you now, and I'd like you to type in the chat box if you know what this hashtag stands for. Okay. Okay, thanks. I accidentally showed that for a second, but some of you were getting it there in the chat box anyway. So OOTD stands for Outfit of the Day. Okay, and so this hashtag is used on fashion blogs, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and other places where people share photos and videos of what they're wearing. Now, this is kind of a bit of a trope in English language teaching, you know, a bit of an old and possibly tired idea that you're working with clothes vocabulary and the present continuous, so you ask students to describe what they're wearing, and in the context of the classroom, where we can all see each other and we all know what we're wearing, it seems a bit pointless, really. And so it's kind of one of those mechanical exercises that doesn't really seem to have a communicative purpose. And all the more so if you're working with a class of students who are in school uniform, because obviously everybody's uniform is exactly the same. But with this hashtag, you actually step outside the classroom, and in the real world there are people who are sharing short videos with this. Okay, so there's like you can actually take examples from the real world and show them if you want as a model. Okay, so I can see a little comment there from Judith that it wouldn't work because you're working with Arabic people. Okay, well, they could actually talk about the accessories that they've got, or something that they've got in their bag. It wouldn't have to follow this hashtag. This hashtag would probably be less relevant for them. But the relevance of the hashtag is that it's something that shares beyond the classroom. Um, in fact, with my teenagers, as soon as there's a hashtag, they think that's just kind of relevant enough. And what I did in class is that we had actually been working on describing photos for oral exams. And although the description of the people in the photo is kind of like secondary, but at PET they still need to have some fluency at least at being able to describe the people in the photos. So we were working towards building confidence in describing what people were wearing. And so we'd been working on vocabulary, and then we were going to put this in practice with an OOTD video. And so in this case, the students were all filming at the same time in the classroom and outside. Now, one of the problems when you're filming, obviously with audio as well, is that when you have different groups filming at the same time, then you get a lot of interference with background noise, possibly. So they need to know to go into a corner of the classroom, turn their backs on the rest of the class, or if you can use a corridor or an outside space, then that can really help as well. So this is a very, very simple little idea. It took absolutely no time at all. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, and I'm going to share an example with you now. Okay, this is Hilda, and she's one of the older teens in my class at the moment, very confident and incredibly happy to be filmed. Okay, again, I'm going to kind of keep quiet for about 10 or 15 seconds after the video stops, just in case I'm talking over it, if anybody's got any lag.
Oh, hi! Hi, Hilda! Can you tell us what are you wearing today?
Well, today I'm wearing some black boots. These ones are a little bit old. You can see they have like these little marks. I'm wearing a pair of black tights and then a black dress. You know, today I feel like everything black. And then I'm wearing just a denim jacket and a hairband and anything else. Then some my basic earrings and nothing else.
Thank you, Hilda. You're very beautiful.
Okay, so that was Hilda, I think, making the most of a very simple exercise. And she wasn't in school uniform that day, which helped. What do you think we could do with this video after we've actually finished it, when we have this video? Because the idea here with these micro tasks is that once the video is made, we're going to use it in the class to do something extra with, in this case, with the language in the video. How do you think we could move on from the video filming? Okay, so there's lots of ideas here. You can discuss a description, you can work on reported speech. Yeah, there's that little mistake right at the beginning. You can give feedback. This is one of the great things about having video recordings, short video recordings from the students, is that you can give such solid feedback on speaking and that they can listen to themselves again. And it's like we used to think that writing was the only way to capture evidence of production, but now with the students being able to have examples of themselves speaking on their phones, it's incredibly easy for them to self-assess and also for us to help them with additional feedback. One of the things that I do, and in this case what we did in this class, is I actually set the video recording as a self-dictation. So I ask them to write down a script of exactly what they wrote what they said, sorry, during the video. Okay, so they write it down word for word. This takes a little bit of training because they usually self-correct as they write, which of course is not bad at all. But the idea is that if they have the original and then they self-correct on that, then the corrections are becoming more visual. Or sometimes, rather than self-dictate, then they will write the transcript for the other group. Or other groups, and then they swap that way, so we get something which is more objective. So yes, Elena, you're saying a selfie is good as well. Record yourself rather than having to do it in front of the class or with a partner recording you. This is obviously something that students can do in their own time as well, away from the classroom. So in this case of the OOTD, we looked at the language in the recording, which was quite informal, quite basic, quite simple, and asked them to recast it as something more formal. So in this case, it was the voiceover for a catwalk. So imagine that this is a model, she's showing this these clothes, and someone is talking about her in the third person. So then they recast the script in the third person, they make it more complete, they make it more formal. We didn't video it again, but if they wanted to, then they could. Okay, so obviously there are so many different things that we can do. The idea here again is that the actual video that they're recording is very short and that it can be done in class. With Hilda's video there, you got some of the disadvantages of recording in class, that you could hear a kind of a murmur of the voices of the other groups in the background. But as you see, that they managed it because Hilda was in the corner and she was being shielded by her partners in the group. Okay, any questions about this? It's a very simple exercise, very easy, very quick, and can be used for any number of focuses. Okay, I'm going to move on to a third example. In this case, this is just one person speaking to the camera. Someone earlier mentioned in the chat about being able to use a selfie. This isn't a selfie because it was actually, in this case, it was me recording the student. And we were working on writing, exam writing. This is with a first certificate class. And we were working on writing reviews. So we were at the ideas generation stage where the students were choosing a favorite TV program or TV series that they were going to write about. And rather than write their initial notes on paper, they were going to just talk about what it was that they liked about that particular series, why they'd chosen it, and what they thought they could use, just generally brainstorming ideas that they could use in their review. So the student I'm going to show you now is one of the shyer students in the class. And at the beginning of the video, you can see that she's really not very comfortable being recorded. This was the first time that I'd recorded her in the class. And she starts off kind of looking down at her book, at her notes, and then at a certain point in the video, you'll see that she relaxes. She gets kind of interested in the story that she's telling us, and her body language changes, and it's wonderful because it signals this little switch where she suddenly starts to become much more confident. There was also there's kind of like a second agenda, as it were, here, was that I was filming them talking about it for 1 minute with the idea of showing them that the 1 minute turn that they have to take in part 2 of the oral exam is not so long. That they can speak for a minute, that's not something that should daunt them. And this student in particular, Fatima, she was daunted by the idea of this, the exam, the first certificate exam, this class preparing for the first certificate exam. And she was daunted by the idea of having a 1 minute long turn. So let me show you Fatima. She's very quiet at the beginning. You may not be able to understand her, and then she will start to speak more loudly. Look at her body language in particular. And if you can make out the TV series she's talking about, then just write that in the chat box. Okay, here's Fatima. Just a second. You'll need to listen carefully. And as I say, at the end, I'm going to just keep quiet again for 10 or 15 minutes in case there's lag. I really don't want to be talking over her. If you want to let me know when the video's finished for you in the chat box, that would be great, because that can give me a sign to start talking again. Okay, here's Fatima.
When I will write a review about Modern Family, because I think it's a great and funny and very funny series. I love all the characters, especially Phil, Luke, Cam, Gloria, all of them. And all my family loved the series, but we have lost the first seasons because my husband was the one who discovered the series more or less 2 or 3 years ago. When I was in a congress, he was watching the TV. He watched the first episode, and when I returned, he told me, I have discovered a very funny series, and after that we usually watch all the episodes, and we laugh a lot with the characters and all the situations you see in their life.
Okay, it looks like a lot of you are done. So someone was saying there in the chat box that she doesn't seem very shy. She was definitely shy of the camera to start with, but now she just loves recording herself and does it all the time. But one of the things that she was surprised over, that we asked her at the end, right, Fatima, how long do you think you spoke for? And she was going like, I don't know, was that more than a minute? And I don't know if you noticed on the video that it was a minute and 24 seconds. And she was delighted. It's all right, okay, that's easy. I can do it. And I don't know if you noticed that point in the video where she kind of sat up straighter, looked straight at the camera. She's talking to me beyond the camera. The other students in the class are kind of laughing with her as she's listing the names of the people in the family, and you can see that is kind of, she really does, she enjoys it by the end. And yes, she was running out of words, yes, towards the end, but it was something that for her was a very, very positive moment in the classroom. And then, of course, we had this recording that we could work with. And there were 2 things that we did with it. So one was that, because this was one recording that was happening at that time, there weren't simultaneous recordings going on around the room. We were all listening to Fatima. So the other students did a recall exercise of listing all of the things that she'd said about the program. Whilst Fatima and me, we just quickly went over a couple of doubts that she'd had. She wasn't sure about how to pronounce laugh. She was getting confused between series, as in TV series, and the Spanish serie. So she was just slipping it out in Spanish most of the time. And And so we had a chance to just quickly look at a couple of things which were mainly either vocabulary or pronunciation that came out of that. We looked at the difference between to love and to laugh, which gave us an interesting little minimal pair. And then we asked the other students to feedback on their recalling of what Fatima had said about the program. And then together we worked on that list of contents and decided what would and what wouldn't be relevant to be included in a review. And so we looked at an exam question, we looked to see what the review was. Would it or would it not be appropriate to include a little anecdote about how she found out about the review? We decided that that would be interesting. It would add a point of interest to what was going to be an online article in a school magazine. And then with that information, with that brainstorming, ideas generation, Fatima went on to write her review. And she actually wrote a great review, which we used then in a later class to work with all of the grading standards with the exam and see, and she would have got a fantastic grade for her writing. We repeated this a couple of times with another couple of students then when we were coming up with new writing tasks. So that's another way of using short, in this case it was slightly over a minute, but not so, and we only played it, we didn't actually play it in the class at all. The other students were there and present whilst Fatima was speaking, so the replaying of it was only for private consumption of Fatima. And in this case, public consumption by you, and a big thank you to Fatima for letting us use it. Okay, so any questions there, or can I move on to the last example? Okay, if you have any questions, we can come to them at the end. So, example 4, this is a very, very simple example with the same class. We've been doing a lot of oral exam preparation, and this kicks off by watching an example of the oral exam on YouTube. If you go onto YouTube, you can see examples of exams that have been prepared by Cambridge Assessment to help teachers and students. And so, first of all, we look at the layout of it so they get familiar with what it looks like in the actual examining room. And then we set up the classroom as if it were a mock exam room. And in this case, we were lucky that we could use the corridor outside as well, where there were tables and chairs, and we could have 3 different exam rooms set up. And so the students could work as the interlocutor, the assessor, and the 2 candidates, plus camera person. They filmed each other. We haven't yet done a whole exam because that's actually a long chunk of time. We do it part by part. So far we've looked at part 1, which is the personal questions at the beginning, the warm-up, and we've looked at part 2, which is describing the photos. And we've done it both as set up as a mock exam room, and a way that the students kind of get a bit bored of seeing their own faces on the video, so they use their video recorders on their phones as audio recorders, but at the same time they're focusing the camera on the photographs that they're describing. So each group is describing different sets of photographs. When they swap their phones, there's a photo of the photos, so the other students can see the photos and they can hear the description. So they can see what the students are describing. That works out quite nicely. And again, there's so many different variations on this. Again, we work with self-dictation or peer dictation, writing out a transcript, working very closely on the transcript and what else could you say, how could you say that differently, grading each other using the criteria. And so this is something then that they build up with the preparation for the oral exam becomes much less scary. This idea that they've actually been videoing each other doing it seems to boost their confidence a lot. So something very, very similar, but this time video again as audio. So the same step here, that the students created their own, as it were, first certificate listening tasks for each other using the phone, using the video recorder again. The audio was the listening task and the visual was a multiple choice question that the students had written to accompany their recorded story. So in this case, the video is audio, and I found that when I wanted to use voice recorders on the phones with the students in general, whether teens or adults, very often they didn't feel very confident. They might not even know where the voice recorder was. They didn't know how to access the recordings afterwards. Whereas with the camera, and most cameras have the option of still photo or video, they felt much happier with that. The quality of the audio is usually better, and they know where to find the file afterwards. So I tend to use the camera for audio a lot anyway. Okay, so the description of that last example is there on the slide for you. And at the bottom there's a link to a blog post which describes that lesson in more detail. Excuse me, I'm just going to clear my throat. Okay, and so we've come to the end of the examples. And just quickly to recap, so all of these are micro tasks. The videoing is done in class if you can. If not, they can be set for homework. It's one take, so no rehearsal. It's just that one take, and then it's used immediately afterwards. So it doesn't stop with the video. The video isn't the final product. The video is something that then is continued on in the lesson. Support. As far as technical support goes, the students need minimal technical support for recording in class, I've found. But they may need some support if you want them to share those videos with you afterwards. And exploitation, this is a completely open, if not endless list. Mutual dictation, peer feedback, teacher feedback, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so we've almost finished and we're almost coming to the any questions. Just very quickly, what we've been talking about today has been micro tasks. So the students making very short videos on their phones in the class, not at all sophisticated, but it might be that you want to explore the possibility of more extended video projects with secondary students, in which case you may be interested in the series of blog posts and worksheets that have been published recently in the on the Cambridge blog and called Students in the Director's Chair. And that's a series of 3 blog posts, 3 worksheets, taking the class through the stages of preparing and then exploiting their own slightly more extended video projects. There'll be a webinar in May following up on this project work. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much. And this is the link to my blog. And so, if there any questions?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Kerry, for such an interesting session. As Kerry said, if you have any questions, then please do feel free to post them in the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can. We've had a few come through through the webinar. I'm sorry if you covered this during the webinar, but how much time does the silent movie activity usually take for students?
Um, to the point of making the video, 15 minutes, maybe even less, 10 to 15 minutes. Then, depending on the exploitation afterwards, that could take up the whole of an hour or even an hour and a half long class if they're then going to write a story embedding that one little clip in it. Sometimes they want to even record further little mini scenes, and it really depends how far you and the students want to take it. But it can be as little as 15 minutes in the classroom.
Great. A question from Yana that we had. What do you do if a student refuses to be recorded? Have you got any ways of
Let
dealing
them be
with
the
that?
camera person. They don't have to be recorded. Let them be the camera person. Let them focus the camera on something else. Sorry?
Oh, no, that sounds a good idea.
Sorry, what was...
A question from Victoria. Do you see any benefit in doing some of these tasks not as micro tasks, so rehearsing them beforehand?
Oh yes, I think there's always benefit in rehearsal and repetition, and so if they want to do that, then that's fine. I think the kind of turning the question on its head, maybe the benefit of not is that you're capturing rawer data. Rawer, can you say that? The data that you're capturing is the first attempt data, as it were. So for feedback on speaking, which is more spontaneous, whereas obviously if it's rehearsed, then you're pushing the output, and there are so many benefits to that, obviously, because they're going to be performing at a higher level. Also repetition, let them record it once and then let them record it again. For example, with the outfit of the day, then we re-record but slightly tweaking the task so that it's a third-person commentary rather than the first-person commentary. And I think any combination of those is great. It's whatever works for your students. But I think that another benefit of the not rehearsing initially is to break down the barriers of those people who don't want to be recorded because they're worried about not being perfect. So that if they see their peers are happy to just be recorded and not be word perfect, and then hopefully there's this kind of trickle down effect of confidence being built up. Or starting with silent recording. Often actually the silent movie, there is quite a bit of rehearsal beforehand because they've got a 10-second limit. So the rehearsals are also very short and not time consuming in any way at all. The longer the final video is going to be, the more time consuming the rehearsal is. So then you have to balance the pros and cons, I guess.
Great, thank you very much. I've got a question from Joke who asks, what about making homework on video as well? I'm sure that's a webinar in itself, but any tips on that?
Making homework on video, yeah, absolutely. It's so, for example, just in the same way as you could set taking a still image as homework, you can also ask the students to make very short videos of themselves for homework, which they can... Short is good because it's easier to share and it's easier to view if you want to use them in class. And if in my case, my students tend to share with me on the phone, so then also there's a question of memory. If I'm getting videos that are too long from the students, they're clogging up my phone. But also they can obviously be shared then onto some kind of online space, like a Padlet page. I'm going to just type that in there. A Padlet page is a great place to share all the videos. You could ask students to, for example, set their alarm for a certain time the next day, 6 o'clock in the evening or something, and then they have to make a 10 to 15 second long video of wherever they are, and then in the next lesson they can talk about where they were, what they were doing, what happened just before, what happened just afterwards. That's just one kind of off the top of my head possible example, and I think video homework is great. The main questions there, I think, would just be the technically how do they share it with you. And obviously the answer
Great,
to
thank
that
you.
question depends on your context.
Lovely, thank you very much. We've had sort of two opposite questions come in. One asking about tips for using videos with beginners and low-level students, and also about using them
Yeah.
with upper intermediate students. So what the differences are between those groups.
Okay. Basically, I think there's no difference between those groups. The difference is um, the difference that you would find in teaching those groups anyway. So with lower level students, I think it's a question of possibly more rehearsal is necessary, whereas the upper intermediate students would be able to go straight in to some spontaneous speaking. So I think more structure, more scaffolding is necessary with the elementary students. They tend to enjoy role playing a lot. So any kind of role play, a shop role play, a restaurant role play, anything like that. And I found that it really, really helps them build confidence in listening, because with my most recent beginners class here in Spain was an older class, and they had huge psychological problems with listening. So actually getting them to listen to each other, record each other having rehearsed, and then listening to that was something that I found was kind of breaking down that barrier quite a lot for them. So, and with the upper intermediate, well, most of the things that we've been looking at today would work fine with upper intermediate. It's just a question of showing them that you're going to look at the language afterwards. So even if the language the first time round is very simple, then they can work on it a second time round. You can work on it on paper, but then you can get them to re-record as well. I really think that it's not a problem with either end of the scale there.
Lovely, thank you very much. I think we've got time just for one more. It's more of a comment, but how you might address the time that it would take to give that one-to-one feedback.
Okay, I think that's an interesting one, because I thought initially when I started asking students to send me either audio recordings or video recordings as part of their homework, that it would take me much longer to correct than a piece of writing. It doesn't. It takes me much less time. Whilst I'm watching or listening, I'm also typing in a Word document my reactions, and that's it. Basically, my feedback is there. I give them audio feedback as well as typed feedback, and if we're working on pronunciation, then I'll offer them models as well, where they're having problems with the pronunciation, and usually we share that either by email or, as I say, on the phone groups that we use. So we're using WhatsApp a lot for that kind of thing, and it's no more time consuming. In my experience, it's less time consuming than feeding back on writing.
Great. Well, I think unfortunately that's all we've got time for today. But don't forget that we'll be back next week on Tuesday, the 22nd of March, with Adrian Duff. Who'll be exploring how we can make learning manageable for lower level learners of English. Then on the 29th of March, Joanna Sterling will be looking at spelling strategies for helping weaker spellers. You can find out more and sign up for all of our upcoming webinars by visiting our events page, which is cambridge.org/ELT events. And Kerry mentioned that she's got another webinar coming up in May, and we'll hope to include that link for you in your email. So the recording of today's webinar will be live on our blog and our YouTube channel next week, and we'll send you a certificate with all of those links and hopefully the link to sign up to Kerry's next webinar as well. So thank you very much, Kerry, for your time this afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending.